What if you could build a real MVP in minutes without writing a single line of code? And I know it sounds unrealistic, maybe even exaggerated, but in the next few minutes, you're going to watch it happen live. And most founders spend like, what, 3 to 6 months building MVPs that nobody actually wants. And that is a common estimate in startup circles, and it's not because they lack intelligence or work ethic. They invest months of late nights, burn through savings or funding, and pour their momentum into something that they hope will work, and then they finally launch and are met with silence. No users, no traction, no meaningful feedback at all whatsoever. And the real problem is not skill, it's speed. By the time most teams ship their product, their market has already moved on. User expectations shift, competitors evolve, and the original opportunity window just starts to close. Traditional MVP development takes too long, and that's it. But the game has changed because today, I'm going to show you how AI has completely flipped the way MVPs are built. You're going to see how an idea can go from concept to working software in minutes, not months, and why that shift fundamentally changes how founders should approach building products. So the AI tool that will help us build the entire MVP for us is Base44. They are simply one of the best AI builders at this moment. And I added a special link in the description down below, so you can go ahead and check them out too. So now if you also want to master Base44 and learn how to build a profitable SaaS, a website, and a mobile app with AI, I've created a complete masterclass that shows you exactly how to do it step by step by step. And since you are watching this video, you can go ahead and join completely free. Just check out the link in the description below to get free access to the Base44 masterclass, and you can start building your AI-powered business today. Let's go ahead and get started. So before we look at what's possible today, let's go ahead and help you understand first how MVPs are usually built and why that process just creates so much friction for founders. When someone has a new product idea, the first challenge is figuring out how to turn it into something testable. Most founders end up choosing one of three common paths, and each one does come with its own limitations. So the first approach is what I would call human automation. Instead of building real infrastructure, you just manually simulate the product behind the scenes. And if users submit a form, you respond to them personally by email. If data needs to be tracked, you update a spreadsheet yourself. If onboarding is required, you guide each user step by step. And in the beginning, this can feel like a smart shortcut. It allows you to move without writing code, and it gives you the appearance of a working system. However, it's also clear that you are the system. Every action depends on you. Every mistake is yours to fix. It's time-consuming, it's mentally draining, and it's impossible to scale. So if you miss a message or forget a step, well, then the experience breaks down immediately. And the second route many founders take is using no-code tools. So these platforms promise simplicity, and the idea is that you can visually drag and drop components, you can connect workflows and launch without technical expertise. And on the surface, that sounds ideal. But once you begin building something slightly more complex, you start running into layers of hidden logic and conditional workflows. You may need to connect multiple services together, often using automation tools like Zapier. And those integrations can then fail unexpectedly, sometimes at the worst possible time. And you're going to end up spending weeks learning how different tools communicate with each other and then debugging processes that you did not design. So the result is that, yeah, no code still requires a steep learning curve, just in a different form. And then the third and the most traditional path is full custom development. So this typically involves hiring a developer or learning to build it yourself. So now you are the one responsible for creating the front-end interface, then setting up the back-end logic, implementing authentication so users can actually log in, designing the database structure, arranging hosting, and managing deployments. It's a lot. Even for a relatively simple MVP, a common estimate for this process is like 3 to 6 months. And that estimate assumes that everything goes smoothly, and we all know in reality, everything rarely goes smoothly. Features take longer than expected, costs increase beyond the original budget, and then the scope just expands as new ideas are added mid-build. Technical issues appear that require additional time to fix, and after months of work, you may finally launch only to discover that you still have no idea whether users truly want what you built out. So this is the real MVP trap. You invest significant time, money, and technical effort before you even have real validation. And you need to commit heavily to building before you have proof of demand. And for many founders, that is where ideas lose momentum or quietly disappear. And at its core, the problem comes down to time, cost, technical barriers, and uncertainty. The build step becomes the bottleneck here, slowing everything down before you even know if the idea is worth pursuing. So the real question then is, what happens if the build step is no longer the bottleneck? Or what changes if creating the MVP is no longer the hardest part, right? So that is exactly what we are about to explore here. To understand what's happening right now, let's go ahead and try to clarify what's actually different about this new wave of AI tools. A lot of people still assume that AI building simply means generating a clean interface or a basic demo. And if you've experimented with other tools, well, you may have seen something that looks impressive at first glance, only to realize it isn't truly usable. There's no real database behind it. User accounts don't actually exist. Data doesn't persist properly throughout the app, and turning it into something functional still requires a developer. So that gap is what made the idea of building a serious MVP with AI feel unrealistic. And what's changed is that AI can now generate full software systems, not just screens. So when I say real software, I mean the parts that normally slow MVPs down: a database that stores data, authentication that lets users create accounts and log in, dashboards that display real information, and of course, APIs that connect the different parts of the product. So on top of that, it can actually deploy the application so you can just share it with users and start collecting feedback right away. And the other important shift is how you control the build. You don't have to speak in code. You don't have to know framework names or technical terminology at all. Just describe what you want in plain English, what the app does, who it's for, and what it should include. And then the tool just turns that into a working structure. But let me make this clear. This is not a faster coding. It's a different workflow entirely, where the build happens through instructions instead of implementation. So now this is where Base 44 comes in. And the reason I'm using it for this demo is because it is designed around that idea from the very beginning. And when you open up Base 44, you're not going to be forced into templates or long setup steps. You don't even have to start by wiring integrations or setting up a database yourself. All you need to do is start with a prompt box, and that's the interface. So just describe the product, and Base 44 generates the app around that description. And as it builds, it will handle the pieces that normally eat up weeks of time. It will create the backend automatically. It will set up authentication so real users can log in. It will generate the database structure so information can be stored properly. And it will also build the front end with responsive design so it works on mobile and desktop without you rebuilding layouts. In other words, it won't give you a mockup. It will give you a functional MVP foundation. So rather than debating whether this is possible or not, the best way to understand it is really to just watch it happen right now. So I'm going to type in a prompt in plain English. I'm going to hit enter, and then we're going to see if it can generate a working MVP the way that it claims. And if it works, it will change the entire timeline of MVP building. And if it doesn't, you'll see exactly where it falls apart. And you know what? Either way, the demo will answer the question. All right, so let's go ahead and build something practical and relevant. We're not going to create a simple demo application. I want to build something that solves a real problem for SaaS founders. So the idea we're going to use is a subscription tracker designed specifically for founders who run SaaS businesses. So this is like a common pain point here. Most founders rely on dozens of different tools, including analytics platforms, design software, automation services, hosting providers, and of course, communication tools. And then over time, these recurring subscriptions, of course, they add up, right? Costs increase gradually, tools pile on top of each other, and it just becomes difficult to track where money is actually going each month. So this is a simple problem, but it directly affects profitability. So now I'm going to describe this idea to Base 44 using plain English. I'm not going to structure it like a technical specification or use development terminology. I'm simply just going to explain what I want the application to do. So here's the prompt I'm going to use. I want to build a subscription tracking app where users can add their subscriptions, see monthly costs, get renewal reminders, and view spending analytics. And that is the entire instruction. So after submitting it, we have to just wait and see what happens. So as Base 44 begins generating the application, you can see here the structure forming on your screen. The front-end layout appears first, of course, a navigation menu is created, and a dashboard interface begins to load up. And at this point, it might look like just another typical interface being generated, right? But the important detail here is what is happening behind the scenes. The system is not only building the visual components, it's also generating the back end. And if we look at the data structure, we can see that a user model has already been created. There's also a subscription model with predefined fields. And those fields include the subscription name, the price, renewal date, and the category. So this means that the database logic is automatically structured without requiring any manual schema setup. Authentication is also included as part of the build. So users can create accounts, they can log in securely, and they can manage their own subscription data. In traditional development, setting up authentication alone can take up to several days and sometimes even longer, depending on complexity. So in this case, though, it's configured instantly. But here's the thing, Base 44 isn't just incredibly powerful, but most people don't even know how to use it properly. They end up building these basic apps that don't make money or websites that don't convert. And that's exactly why I created my complete Base 44 masterclass. Inside of the course, I'm going to show you step by step how to build profitable SaaS businesses, high converting websites, and mobile apps, all using AI with zero coding required. You're going to learn how to build SaaS apps that solve real problems and generate recurring revenue. I'm going to also show you the exact prompts and strategies I use to create professional websites in minutes, how to clone successful apps and add your own profitable twist, my proven system for turning Base 44 projects into actual income streams. And this isn't just theory either. I'm going to walk you through real builds just like this video. I'm going to show you my exact process and give you the templates and the frameworks that have helped my students launch successful AI-powered businesses. So if you are serious, only if you're serious here, about building something profitable with AI in 2026, please do go ahead and click the link in the description to join the Base 44 Masterclass. I promise you, your future self is going to thank you for taking action today instead of just watching tutorials. So next, let's go ahead and look at how the application handles responsiveness. When switching, say, between desktop and mobile views, the layout adapts automatically. The spacing remains clean, the components stay aligned, and nothing here breaks visually. So this does not resemble a rough wireframe, and it does look like a well-built foundation that could realistically be used in production. So now let's open up the dashboard here to examine the functionality more closely. As you can see on your screen, there is a total monthly cost counter that calculates overall subscription spending. Also, there is a list section where individual subscriptions will appear once they are added. There is also a clearly labeled button that allows users to add new subscriptions. An analytics chart placeholder is also already included to display spending insights visually. This is an important matter here. The system does not simply generate separate pages. It interprets the product idea and structures the application around the intended use case. So now let's go ahead and take the next step and deploy the application. So if I'm going to click the deploy button here, Base 44 prepares the hosting environment, it configures the necessary infrastructure, and it generates a live URL. So under traditional development workflows, this stage would involve setting up domains, managing servers, and handling multiple configuration steps. But in our case here, it happens all automatically. And within minutes, we've moved from a written idea to a live SaaS structure. However, appearances alone are not enough. A clean interface doesn't guarantee real functionality. If the application is only a visual shell without working back-end logic, then nothing meaningful has changed, right? So for the next step, we're going to test it out and we're going to confirm that it functions as a real product. Now that the application has been generated and deployed, the most important step is to verify whether it actually works as a real product. So the true test here is whether the backend logic, the authentication, and data handling function properly in a live environment. So let's start by opening the live URL that was generated during deployment. The application loads immediately, and the login screen appears clean and properly structured. There are no layout issues or broken components or visible errors. The interface looks pretty stable actually and production ready. So to test authentication now, let's go ahead and create a new account by entering an email address and a password. After completing the sign-up process, I am redirected directly into the dashboard, and this confirms that the authentication system is fully operational. The application has successfully created a real user account and established an active session. So next up, I do want to test the primary feature of the application by adding subscriptions. So let's click the Add Subscription button and enter the first tool, Notion, with a monthly cost of $20 and a renewal date set for next month. And after saving the entry, the subscription immediately appears in the dashboard list. The interface updates in real time, indicating that the data has been stored in the database correctly. And to further validate the logic, I'm also going to add a second subscription, which in this case is Figma with a monthly cost of $15. After saving that one, the total monthly spending updates automatically as well to $35. So this confirms that the backend is performing calculations dynamically based on stored data. And the numbers are not static placeholders either. They reflect real-time processing of user input. So now let's navigate to the analytics section to evaluate whether the reporting functionality works as expected. So the chart here on your screen populates with the subscription data that we just entered, and the spending breakdown also appears correctly categorized. The visual representation that you see responds to actual data stored in the system, confirming again that the front end and the back end are properly connected. Now, beyond functionality, the overall interface maintains a high level of visual quality, at least in my opinion. The spacing between elements is consistent, the layout feels modern and balanced, and the typography is clean and it's readable. The application does not resemble a rough prototype or an early mockup. It actually presents itself as a polished product that could realistically be shared with users. So when comparing this process to traditional no-code development, the difference here is really significant, night and day. Normally, you would manually design each page, configure the database structure yourself, connect form actions to back-end logic, and then test every possible interaction. Even for a relatively straightforward product like this one, that workflow could easily take several weeks, particularly if you're building alone. And in this case, the entire process from idea to live functioning product was completed in minutes of a video on YouTube. So the most important implication here is that this application can already be shared with real users. It's not a concept or a design prototype, it's an operational SaaS product. And you can begin collecting feedback right away. You can observe user behavior and validate whether or not the idea resonates with your audience. So that ability to move directly into validation is what fundamentally changes the strategy. However, speed by itself is not the only advantage here. The deeper strategic impact becomes clear when we look at how this changes iteration and market position. So when you can move from idea to working product in minutes or hours instead of months, the entire timeline just shifts. While competitors are still designing features, hiring developers, or waiting on revisions, you are already in the market collecting feedback. You're speaking directly with users, identifying friction points, refining onboarding flows, and improving the overall experience. So now you are observing real behavior and making adjustments in response. And that gap compounds quickly. In a single month, you could realistically run multiple iterations of your product. And you might test 5 variations of pricing, onboarding, or feature placement while a traditional team is still building version 1. And each iteration gives you more insight, and those insights then accumulate into better product decisions. And that is leverage. There's also a financial dimension to this shift. Hiring a developer to build even a simple MVP can be expensive. A common estimate for, say, a basic build often ranges from $3,000 to $10,000, and in many cases, it can be significantly higher depending on scope and region. On top of that initial cost, revisions introduce additional expenses. Also, delays, increased budgets, expanded feature requests raise the final invoice, and the financial risk just accumulates before validation ever occurs. But in contrast, using an AI-driven tool significantly lowers the barrier to entry. No need to pay long-term contracts or payroll commitments. You just have to pay a fraction of traditional development costs. So there is also no need to commit thousands of dollars up front just to test whether or not your idea resonates. So you can build, you can deploy, and then evaluate without placing a heavy financial bet on unproven assumptions. So that fundamentally changes who is able to start building. And another major advantage is the power of iteration. When you want to adjust a layout, you can just describe the change in plain English. When you want a new feature, just explain it in plain language again. And when analytics need improvement, request an update. The application evolves in response to instructions rather than code rewrites. This reduces hesitation because you're no longer locked into expensive implementation cycles. And then over time, this will change where your attention goes. You no longer need to focus on architecture and technical complexity. Instead, you can just concentrate on the elements that actually determine whether a company succeeds or not. And you can just focus on understanding your customers or refining your messaging and improving positioning and strengthening distribution. So all of those are the levers that build businesses, not perfect back-end structure. However, moving quickly without clarity can still waste time. Building multiple versions of the wrong idea is still building the wrong idea, right? So the key question now is how to use this speed strategically so that each iteration moves you closer to product market fit rather than simply creating more output. So that is what we need to address next. So here's what I recommend. Instead of overanalyzing the concept or debating back and forth whether this will work for your specific situation, just test it yourself. Start with a free account and experiment with your own idea. There is no heavy commitment required here at the beginning, and you can upgrade only when your project begins to grow. So the goal at this stage is not perfection, it's momentum. If you are building a SaaS business, this represents a meaningful competitive advantage. This is not hype or theory, so the edge comes from execution speed. While other founders are still debating feature sets or refining wireframes or waiting on development timelines, well, you can already just be live on the market, in the market, collecting all of your feedback. And while others are polishing mockups, you can just onboard users already. And that difference just compounds over time. Many founders will see the shift and still hesitate, and some will assume it is too new, too unconventional, or too good to be true. Am I not right? And that hesitation is exactly why the opportunity exists. The advantage belongs to those who act early and move quickly. I've included a link in the description down below that you can use yourself to access the platform. And more importantly here, it's going to give you the opportunity to build something real. So open up a new project, type in your idea, and then just watch what happens when it turns into working software right in front of your eyes. There is a moment that changes your perspective here, and it usually happens the very first time you see your own concept become a live product. And once you experience that shift, that moment, it is difficult to go back to the old way of thinking about MVP development. Trust me, try it. And it's crazy how AI removed one of the biggest barriers to building software. Creating an MVP is no longer limited to people who can code or afford a development team. It is now accessible to anyone with a clear idea and the willingness to act. And you just watch an app go from concept to live product in minutes. So the real question is, what is your SaaS idea? Write it down, open up the tool, build it today. Speed changes outcomes, and opportunities do not stay open forever. So thank you for sticking around until the end of this video and investing your time in me today. I'll see you at the next one.